Welcome to this session on managing stress and time, taking action with prioritization and self-care. Just a quick note to have a piece of scratch paper and a pen or a pencil ready, and just get comfortable. Thank you for inviting me to speak with you today. Okay, my name is Libby Pescarello. I'm a health coach nurse. I'm also a nurse educator. I do teach some classes online for South Dakota State University. I am located in Decatur, Illinois, and I work at the Decatur Wellness Collective as a health coach nurse there. My email is on there. I will share that again at the end, and I invite feedback, I invite questions and interaction. Okay, here's our agenda for today. It's kind of nice to know where we're going. These are the things that I'm going to walk you through. Keep in mind with this recorded presentation that you can pause this at any time. I'm not going to do long pauses in my presentation, but there will be times that I will ask you to reflect or do an activity. And at that time, you can just pause the video and then restart when you're ready. So we're going to start today with a stress self-assessment. This is a perceived stress assessment. That's what you'll need your scratch paper for. Next, we'll move into personality styles and behaviors as barriers to effective time and stress management. So this is some more information for you to self-assess. Then we'll move to time management techniques and talking specifically about prioritization, scheduling, and then execution. We'll have a little bit of information on finding your time and personal boundaries, a little fun with pie charts. So when we get to that, hopefully you find that interesting. It's nothing that you'll need your scratch paper for, but it could be something that you end up wanting to take home with you or translate and share with somebody else. And then finally, we're going to create a SMART goal so that hopefully you can leave today's session with an action plan in place for yourself. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is the self-assessment. So like any good nurse, we know that that's the beginning of things, right? When we want to address something with ourselves or with others or in any situation, we always start with a self-assessment. So there's a variety of self-assessment tools out there related to stress. Together, we're going to take a look at the perceived stress assessment. That's what's on your screen now. And you'll take some time to complete it for yourself. Now, I know I don't have printouts, and that's why you have your scratch paper. So on that piece of scratch paper, make a numbered list of 1 through 10, just on the side, 1 through 10 down. Next to each number as we go, and I will read each of these aloud to give you time to consider and rate yourself. You're simply going to write down your rating for each statement. The key is at the top in case you forget, but 0 is never, 1 is almost never, 2 is sometimes, 3 being fairly often, and 4 being very often. We will score together on the next slide, so don't get ahead of yourself with adding up or anything like that. Just give yourself your rating for each one, doing your best to simply consider how often you have done or felt these things in the last month. So there's another important key, in the last month. So number 1, in the last month, how often have you been upset because of something that happened unexpectedly? Again, 0 to 4, the key's at the top. Number 2, felt that you were unable to control the important things in your life. Number 3, felt nervous and stressed. Number 4, felt confident about your ability to handle your personal problems. Again, 0 to 4 at the top. Number 5, felt that things were going your way. Number 6, found that you could not cope with all the things you had to do. Number 7, been able to control irritations in your life. Number 8, felt that you were on top of things. Number 9, been angered because of things that happened that were outside of your control. And number 10, felt difficulties were piling up so high that you could not overcome them. If you're still working on your ratings, this is a good time to pause the video. Because now we'll move into scoring. Now we'll take the time to score and interpret your results. So here's the scoring method. You're going to first start by reversing your scores for questions 4, 5, 7, and 8. So on those 4 questions, change the scores like this. If you scored yourself a 0 on any of those 4, again, 4, 5, 7, and 8. If you scored yourself a 0, change it to a 4. If you scored yourself a 1, change that to a 3. A 2 remains a 2. If you scored yourself a 3, change it to a 1. And if you scored yourself a 4, change that to a 0. For all other numbers, you're going to use the number you wrote down as your score, and now you can tally your score. So add up your numbers now that you've made those changes to 4, 5, 7, and 8. When you have your score, you can then do some interpretation. Individual scores on the PSS can range from 0 to 40, with higher scores indicating higher perceived stress. So scores ranging from 0 to 13 would be considered low, 14 to 26 is moderate, and 27 to 40 would be considered high. Certainly don't have to share your scores with anyone. This assessment was for your self-awareness only. But if your score isn't where you'd like it to be, I encourage you to share it with a trusted friend or a family member, a mentor or a therapist, or someone else who will listen deeply and help you move forward. One reason I especially appreciate this particular self-assessment is because it's actually been shown through research that how you perceive your stress level has a large impact on its effect on you and your health. So as we learn to manage our stress, it's just as important to learn how to perceive stress differently as it is to actually mitigate the stressors themselves. Okay, our main topic today is going to be time management, so you can set that self-assessment aside for now. Developing time management skills is one of the best ways that you can mitigate stress. We're going to start by defining this term, time management. There we go. It can be argued that time cannot really be managed because it's finite. However, it is a term that's still very commonly used, so we're going to use it today. Perhaps, though, a more accurate term for the concept of time management is intentional productivity, how we are using our time. Brian Luke Seward, a psychologist specializing in stress management, defines time management or intentional productivity, if you like that term, as the prioritization, scheduling, and execution of daily responsibilities to a level of personal satisfaction. So that's very subjective. When we talk about some time management techniques in a little bit, we'll break them down into those 3 categories: prioritization, scheduling, and execution, as there are things we can do to improve our intentional productivity in each one of those areas. First, though, let's talk about the elephants in the room. You're all successful professionals. You're in this room or in this class, so you certainly have some effective time and stress management skills in your tool belt. So give some time right now just to consider what then gets in your way. Here are a few examples of personality types and behaviors that really get in the way of effectively managing your time or being intentionally productive. As I define and discuss each, see if any of these tendencies applies to you. and how those tendencies might be getting in your way. The typical type A personality will often end up rushing to meet deadlines, sometimes resulting in subpar work, maybe not their best work. They tend to be hyper focused on time with a constant sense of urgency. Next, we have the workaholic. The typical workaholic will spend excessive time working while neglecting other areas of life. So some work-life balance issues here. Quantity, though, does not necessarily equal quality. Interestingly, people with this personality trait will actually reject trying ways to save time or improve efficiency. To them, time spent equals the measure of their work. It's like a form of self-validation. So flipping this mindset from quantity to quality can really help. Next up is the technophile. If I had you in a room, I would ask you how many of you are shocked by your weekly report of screen time use on your devices. You might end up falling into this category if you wake up, or if you wake your phone up to check the weather. So you unlock the screen. You need to know the weather, right? And all of a sudden, an hour or more has passed, and you've gone down a rabbit hole, not only checking the weather forecast, or maybe forgetting to do that entirely, but opening your email, your social media feeds, maybe playing a few games, etc. There are now focus apps available to help us manage our use of these ever-addicting screens. So if you're finding your screen time to be out of control, I encourage you to check those out as an aid. Some are built into the phone itself, and some you would go into the App Store and just search for a focus app and find one that fits for you. Time juggler. This is also known as a multitasker. Ever see someone driving down the interstate with cruise control on while applying their makeup in the mirror? Hopefully this isn't you, but this would be a time juggler. This tendency type tends to take on more than one human can do in a day, assuming they will multitask their way through it. I probably don't have to say it, but this is at the expense of mindfulness and quality. Okay, a procrastinator. Probably don't need to define this one, but this personality tendency uses diversion and avoidance to put off responsibilities. While procrastination can be a frustrating habit to deal with in yourself or someone else, I want you to consider for a moment this. When you're blaming yourself for procrastinating, is there a chance you're simply prioritizing? Sometimes the answer will be no. You're procrastinating and you need to make a plan and get down to business. Sometimes the answer might be yes. That thing that you think you're procrastinating on actually really doesn't need to be done right now, and it can wait. Either way, if you find yourself feeling guilty for procrastinating, it's time to sit down and make a plan for completion. We'll talk more about that in a little bit when we cover some time management techniques. The perfectionist. Well, what's wrong with this one, right? The perfectionist may get too caught up in making every detail perfect. And they get so caught up that they miss the bigger picture, that they miss deadlines. This personality tendency might find it helpful to make peace with the fact that perfect does not exist. Perfection is subjective and is often eternally elusive. So as we look at this list, it's worth noting that I don't consider any of them to be weaknesses. They're simply facets of our personality and behavior that we need to be aware of so we can modify our behaviors and habits to be more successful. I don't know about you, but I can identify with each one of these in different ways and at different times in my life. So hopefully you were able to do a little self-assessment there through that description of each one. We all have quirks and tendencies, and they aren't always something that needs to be cured. rather known, understood, and worked with. All right, let's get into some actionable ways to better manage our time. So as I mentioned earlier, CWORD's definition of time management is the prioritization, the scheduling, and the execution of daily responsibilities to a level of your personal satisfaction. So this is very subjective, and it's all about what you want your time to look like. We're going to break some ideas down into those three categories. So let's start with prioritization. Have you ever felt stuck on how to move forward in getting things done? Perhaps you've felt a feeling of overwhelm when there just seems to be too many moving parts to take action on any one of them. There is a prioritization method to rank order items called ABC 1, 2, 3 that I'd like to share with you. This is an upgrade on the traditional to-do list, and it works best using items that are time flexible, meaning they can be done most any time of the day. So we're not going to use specific time-specific items for this exercise. For example, you have on your planner that you need to pick up your child from school every day at 3 p.m. That may be a non-negotiable. You cannot flex that to 5 o'clock if you'd like to, in order to get something else done at 3. So if you'll play along with me, take a piece of scratch paper out or open up a document on your computer and think about your day or even your week ahead and the to-do list items on your plate. If you have a lot to get done today, just use today. If today is pretty light for you, take a look at a chunk of time, maybe the next few days or even the week ahead. And just start writing a list of all the things that you need and want to do. It doesn't have to be in any particular order. Just write them down as they come to you. I'll spitball some examples as you start to create your own to-do list. You know, I need to do the grocery shopping. The lawn needs to get mowed. Gotta stop by the post office. Oh, there's that job application I want to complete. And I need to email my child's teacher. That's right, I have to begin research for a paper due in 2 weeks. I have to then write that paper. I am way overdue for a date night with my significant other. There's this documentary a friend recommended that I really want to see. It's been on my list for so long. You can see these are all things that I need or would like to accomplish this week. Not all of them sounded super urgent. Some of them more than others. So notice though that none of them were time specific. So nothing like a dentist appointment. And now you'll start your rank order system on these items. So once you have all your list, everything spewed out of your brain and onto paper, we'll use ABCs first. So we'll give an A ranking to any items on your list that are of the highest priority. These must be done in the space of time that you're working with, whether that is just today or whatever you chose, maybe the next few days or week ahead, whatever chunk of time that you chose to work on. So give A's to the highest priority items. And next, give B rankings to any items on your list that are really not of the highest priority, but also really not the lowest. So in other words, you really should do these items soon. And next, give a C ranking to any items that would be really nice to do within that space of time, but really not probably necessary or of the highest priority. These are your lowest priority items. And now that you have your ABCs to start giving some structure to your to-do list, we're going to further break those down by assigning numbers to each rank. So we'll start with the A items. Which A item needs to be done first? So that would be A1. Which one will you complete second? That's A2, and so on. Once you've done all your A's, then move to the B's and do the same thing. B1, B2, and so on, and then the C's. And when you're done, you've got your prioritized to-do list. Now you can take that to your scheduling or planning. So keep that list. We're moving into the second column now, scheduling. Hopefully you're already in the habit of plugging your time-specific appointments and responsibilities into some kind of daily planner. If not, I cannot emphasize enough how necessary this is to time management. If you already keep a daily agenda or a planner, you likely already use some of these techniques like boxing, time mapping, or clustering without necessarily labeling them as such, or even maybe knowing that that's what they were called. Boxing is simply breaking your daily plan down into chunks of time, like morning, afternoon, and evening. You plug in the items you need to accomplish during those boxes of time without putting ultra specific times on them. Time mapping then is getting more specific for days when you have a higher number of specific items to complete. So it's definitely more specific than boxing. And then lastly, clustering is simply making a plan for efficiency. So for example, if I need to run errands, I'm going to cluster those on the same side of town. So you can do the same thing with different activities that fit together. So be sure that you're being efficient in your use of time. And that is clustering. So your daily agenda should contain your time-specific responsibilities first. You know, these are class times, appointment times, etc. Then you can take your prioritized ABC123 to-do list and start plugging in your actual items to your planner. So you're scheduling a time for A1, A2, and so forth, where they best fit among your pre-scheduled items. Lastly, it's time to take action, to execute, to actually follow the plan that you created. So here are some tips listed under that section. We're in the third column now for the best results. Use deadline goals for each item. You can reverse engineer from there to make a tangible plan for finishing that project by that date, breaking it down into smaller tasks, which is the second tip listed. If you're finding yourself feeling stuck or overwhelmed, it might be that listing write the paper is too broad. It feels too big to tackle in one sitting, so we keep procrastinating it. Instead, think about the steps it takes to write the paper and actually list each one of those steps out as a separate to-do list item, and then schedule each one of them appropriately. The next tip listed there is really about being mindful. If you're a time juggler or a multitasker, you might find this one challenging. Work to focus on one task at a time until it's complete. You really can train your brain to be more mindful through practice. So even if you find it difficult, it is worthwhile to practice this. It comes easier with time, thanks to neuroplasticity. We really do create some new neural pathways and ways of doing things. And lastly, don't forget to reward your accomplishment. So a little positive reinforcement goes a long way in establishing any new habit. See how our time use would shift in parenthood and was urging us to make a plan for staying connected with all the other aspects of life alongside parenthood. I like it because it points out the obvious. We only get 24 hours in a day, and you are only one person. Time is finite, remember. How we use that time is up to us. It's also a valuable tool to recognize where you might have had misperceptions about how much you could get done in a day and where you need to uphold some personal boundaries around your space and time. So you can do this on a piece of paper. You could get fancy and do it on a computer, but draw a nice big circle. And this circle represents your 24-hour weekday. Before you think about how you actually use your time on a normal weekday, think about what you would like your ideal weekday to look like. So I'm using weekday and workday a little bit interchangeably. Sorry about that. We're not going to consider a weekend or a time off day at this point. So right now, just start with your typical workday / weekday. Where would you like your time to be spent? Don't forget about sleep. You can get even more specific than I did if you want. I kept mine pretty broad, pretty general, just to show an example. You can write the number of hours for each chunk of time. So whatever you're doing here during this time is your ideal. You'll take this with you today, and if you'd like to continue the exercise, the next thing you'll do is keep an actual time log of one of your normal weekdays, something like this. Then you can use your actual collected data to create a pie chart of how a weekday was actually used and set it next to your ideal weekday. This can show you where you're spending time in ways that you don't want to be and how you can make adjustments to scooch a little closer to your ideal. You could also choose to do this with your weekend days if you'd like. For most of us, a weekend day or non-work day looks a lot different from a weekday or a work day. So pie charting your time can really help show you the bigger picture, where your time and energy is going. Are you dedicating time within each day for yourself, outside of career, school, and family responsibilities? In the busy times of our lives, we can get caught in the trap of prioritizing all those other responsibilities above the responsibility to take care of ourselves. And while that may work in the short run, it will be counterproductive in the long run. It often sets us up for burnout and failure of our health. So it's really counterproductive to neglect time for self-care, even and maybe especially in the busiest times of our lives. I'd love for you just to take a moment to think about the last thing you did for yourself. Something you did for yourself that gave you a feeling of joy or well-being. Self-care doesn't have to reflect the stereotypical idea of wellness. It really can be anything that brings you that feeling of overall well-being. If we aim to bring a bit of self-care into our everyday, we really do need to think about tangible and realistic ways to do that. Along with your 24 hours time log, you might consider how the state of your personal boundaries is with your personal and your professional relationships. There's a table here. This is just shown as an example of 3 levels of boundaries: rigid, porous, and healthy. If you like visuals, you might think of these 3 levels on a spectrum, with rigid on one end and porous on the other, with healthy in the middle. Our personal boundaries vary with different people in different environments, and this is normal and expected. For example, your boundaries with your spouse are probably quite different from your boundaries with an acquaintance. So take a little bit of time to reflect and consider what your boundaries are like within the various realms of your life: work, personal, and otherwise. Are you able to say no without feeling guilty to uphold these boundaries? Establishing and protecting your personal boundaries is key to being able to move your 24-hour use of time log that we just talked about from actual to ideal. If this is an area that you'd like more personal help with, I highly recommend doing some work with a therapist around your unique situation and boundaries. It will serve you for the rest of your life. Okay, let's bring it all together. We began today with some self-assessment of your current perceived stress state to start gaining some awareness. Then we discussed time management, including ways our personality and behaviors can get in our way of that. We then reviewed some basic strategies to start managing our time a little bit better. When we better manage the time we're given in a day and uphold our personal boundaries, we create time for the most important things in life, taking care of ourselves and being with those we love. In turn, stress levels are reduced and we're really living a better quality of life. So I bet you've each created a SMART plan, or excuse me, a SMART goal before. We're going to make a plan for this so that you're leaving this presentation with something actionable for yourself. So as a reminder, a SMART goal is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time limited. Take some time now to consider your takeaways from today's session. Anything that kind of light bulb moments for you or aha moments for you, or maybe they were just things that, nope, I know that and I know that about myself and I have not addressed that. And let's create a goal for yourself that will enhance your time or stress management. And sometimes they're one and the same, aren't they? If there was a technique or a tool we talked about today that you'd like to further explore and develop, write it into your goal. When thinking about what you'd like to set a goal around, I encourage you really not to necessarily pick the thing that you feel is your biggest weakness or need, or even the thing that you might think is the most important. Rather, write a goal around something that you feel most ready and able to work on right now. Once you have your goal written down, you can give it a SMART check. Is your goal specific? Is it measurable? Is it attainable? Is it relevant to your situation? And is it time limited? So even for those goals that you think, well, I don't want this to end, I want to do this forever, set a by when date. This will really help hold you accountable, and it gives you a point in time to come back to this and give yourself a review. How did it go? How did you do? What kind of adjustments do you need to make? And then you move forward with another one and you set another goal date. So it's never ending, right? It's an ongoing process of self-improvement. Lastly, for ultimate accountability, I encourage you to take your goal with you today and share it with someone you trust. Here's the references used in the creation of this presentation today. And again, there's my email, libbypascarello@gmail.com. I wholeheartedly invite you to reach out to me by email with any thoughts or questions, any feedback you have, or if there's some loose ends that you just don't get, if you'd like more information on any of the things that I talked about. Thank you so much for having me.